Hello, George. I'm delighted to be chatting with you after having so many chats on Twitter. But joined with Steve Evans now.
Oh, hi, Steve. Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
Hi, George. Good to make your acquaintance finally. Yeah, Terry's been telling me about you, and you're in New Orleans, which is, you'll have to remind me, the geography is not brilliant. Is that Louisiana way?
Sure is. Down on the beautiful Gulf Coast in the United States.
And how's the weather there today anyway? Is it nice and sunny or?
It is. It's gorgeous today. We finally had a little cool front come through and slightly milder temperatures, which, is our euphemism for autumn here in New Orleans. We don't really have seasonal changes, so just as long as it's cooler.
Yeah, we're doing all right today, actually. Aren't we? Having it's a bit of a late. Well, it's not autumn for sure. It's nice and warm, isn't it, Terry?
It is unusually warm, yeah. An Indian summer, warm in October. It's unheard of.
It's not sunny, but it's warm. It's overcast. But wow, yeah, definitely a bit sticky and a bit, yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway.
it's definitely been different this year. I found we got some severe temperatures for a good long while, so it's a welcome break for sure.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Right. George, before we talk about your audio work and your own writing, tell us what you do to relax. Have you got any hobbies?
I'm a big fan of relaxation, probably a bit too much. I think I listed myself as a strong Finnish procrastinator, but I play music with a couple of my bandmates that we've been together for years in a little cover band. And that's probably more to unwind, but really for relaxing, I love to go sailing and have a time out on the water. That's for sure.
Excellent. Looks like you're a reader as well. I'm looking at your bookshelves behind you.
Yeah, definitely. I'm carnivorous when it comes to reading, obviously, but it's just been a long time habit of mine for sure. Try to soak up some knowledge.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of one. I'm an army veteran myself, obviously in the British Army, so I'm a bit interested in your career then, since you've been around as a US Army Green Beret. Do you miss doing that now these days, being part of an elite force and all that?
That was a lot of hair and a lot of years ago, that's for sure. But I tell you, I miss it and I don't. It depends on what you're talking of. As you could probably attest to, Steve, it kind of makes you an adrenaline junkie that you can't really replicate and have to adjust to. But it part of it I think I'm most appreciative of is it kind of gave you being able to be where I was. And of course, you can't talk about a lot of things and don't want to talk about a lot of things, but it gave you this kind of global empathy that, I was able to gather from my travels and work. And it definitely turns you into a peacenik. I think that's, that's it. And it is, it's something that I think, as advanced as we'd like to think we are as human beings, we're still just slinging sticks and stones at each other. It's just faster and farther. So it's.
Yeah. So when you finish that, have you done then some law enforcement stuff in like as a civilian policeman as well? Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. I worked for a specialty branch. In fact, I'm very close to retiring. I've been at that right at 30 years. So it's luckily I'm that close to being able to do my true love, which is, literature and all of that on a full-time basis. So.
Yeah. Any preference then? If you had to pick one or the other, would you go for the forces or for the civilian type enforcement, if you like?
Yeah, I think it would definitely be with the forces, the military forces. It was a different world that you could operate in versus especially nowadays. I think that globally it's a problem for law enforcement, especially in our large cities here in the US. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know where you're coming from. Yeah, I miss my old forces days, to be honest. I mean, like you say, good times and bad, but there was some great times as well, But,
sure, and the friendships you're able to create that
that's
just never end.
Absolutely.
Where did you get to travel to, Steve? It was Germany, and you to the States as well.
Oh, Canada, mate. Loads of times in Canada, Germany, and then obviously tours out to Gulf and the Falklands and Ireland and so on. You know, all the war zones, as you do.
You're right.
We've connected through Twitter, through a mutual friend, Michelle Corbett. She's going to be reading your audiobook as part of her literary reviews. And she told us the next book she's going to listen to. It's Vyacheslav Nikonov. I can't, have I pronounced that properly? Vyacheslav Nikonov?
Nikonov.
Nikonov.
Yes. Yep, that's it. Vyacheslav Nikonov, yes.
You've got
Nikonov,
it. Yeah,
that's
spot on. The Code of Civilization, which you narrate. And it looks like it's riding high on the Amazon charts at the moment. But tell us about the book and how you connected with the author.
Sure. It's actually, we're very thankful that it's doing so well. It was just released the 26th of September, I believe. And, you know, it's already started to creep up on the bestseller list for geopolitics and globalization. So we're very thankful for that. The book is really fascinating. It's through Vyacheslav Publications out of the Netherlands, which does works throughout the Balkans and in Ukraine and Russian literature and the English translations of them. And this particular book was written several years ago for a Russian audience, and it was translated by the great Hugh Davies out of Oxford. He did a wonderful translation of this book, and that was, I believe, it was launched 2020, and they've just gone to have it created as an audiobook. And I was fortunate enough to audition through ACX, the platform that Audible and Amazon use, obviously. And I don't know if I'll get to speak to the author much. He's actually, you know, he's a very famous Russian academic and politician, obviously. And there's a lot of things geopolitically going on in the world with him. But he's a fascinating character, an academic. He's taught classes in the United States. He runs the Ruski Mir, which is the cultural organization that tries to spread Russian culture and language across the world. But he's also, his grandfather was Vyacheslav Molotov, Stalin's foreign minister, the namesake of the cocktail.
Yeah.
So yeah. Oh. So he's a fascinating character, and the book is very, very well done as far as going through world history and where things stand, how different civilizations and cultures got to where they are today politically, which is starting obviously to affect the rest of the world, as we're seeing with BRICS and Russian and China, you know, collaboration for different economic issues across the global south. So,
yeah.
How does someone get into narration anyway? Is there some sort of training course, or I just often wondered, it was something that I probably wouldn't be able to do, but I know of other narrators, and I've never asked them the question, how do you get into being a narrator? And is it just your voice, someone picks up on your voice, or?
I believe I actually fell into it accidentally. Actually, I hosted a small little YouTube show for a nonprofit I ran for some coastal issues here in the United States and marine life, that sort of thing. But of course, it was recommended to me that I may or may not have a radio voice, you know, and that I should try it. And obviously, the ACX platform is very good for allowing you to audition for works, and that's of course what I did, and picked up this huge project, which was a big one. I think the last Russian that wrote a book this long was, you know,
yeah.
It was War and Peace, you know.
Yeah.
How do you get to train your voice? You know, because it was 27 hours long, the full audio.
It really was. The book came in at 27 hours, and you have to pace yourself. Obviously, it's it can get tired, and you find yourself as it's not as easy as it looks, as simply picking up the book and just reading it into a microphone. You tend to get lazy tongue after a short bit of narration, and, you know, have to break and those kind of things, and definitely stay hydrated.
Yeah.
And part of it really is not so much with this project because it's a straightforward political historical work. But when you get into fiction, there's of course a talent for voice acting that needs to come into play, obviously. So,
yeah.
So do you have, where do you do all your recording? Have you got a complex home studio, or is there somewhere you go to do it?
I have a home studio. It's not very complex. There's a lot of great digital audio workstations readily available for, a nominal fee, basically monthly, that you can utilize. I think the biggest trick is knowing how to work the software and getting it to work for you to make sure everything's done well. And especially you want to turn out a quality product, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I've
It's probably
read...
different to be. Sorry, I was just saying, Terry, it's probably different to being on radio. I do radio presenting, but to do narrating, you've got to have that same voice and you've got to be consistent, haven't you, in what you're saying? You can't just deviate and go all over the place, as you've already alluded to.
That's true. Yeah. And I think for audio, it's such a booming industry, especially now that, listeners come to expect a certain amount of consistency, as you said. It's you don't want to you definitely can't lose it. I found myself, you have to take a break from recording. You can tell when your voice starts to give, and you just it's time to go have a cocktail and a throat lozenge and take a break.
Yeah. George, how do you connect? You mentioned that the connection with the writers, it's all through Audible and ACX. Do you post an audition? Do the writer, do they put a request out on ACX and say, hi, I'm looking for a narrator? And then do you send them a sample of your reading? Is that how it works?
Right. ACX is actually a very thorough platform when it comes to putting the work that's available out there. And it's a lot of books listed on ACX, and you can go through them yourself and choose one that you'd like to audition for. And they send you a sampling of the work itself in PDF format. You just audition. But it's and there's also the other platform, Findaway Voices, but the authors have to look at you. It isn't as readily available as ACX to send an audition.
Yeah. Did you work out? I've looked at it myself for doing my own book. Do you work on a royalty share, or is it just for the full commission?
Most narrators work on a per finished hour basis,
right?
But I have no problem on a royalty share only basis, depending on the work and the author.
Yeah.
For the Code of Civilization, it was a huge work.
Yeah.
The project was 3 months long, but
wow,
I was willing to take that risk just because of the author and the quality of the work. So it's and I prefer to work with authors. Really, I'd rather see authors succeed and get their work out there in audiobook format, whatever's easiest for them.
Gina Kirkin, for example, an author I know, she speaks with her narrator, who's Julia Franklin, and and said, this is what I want you to project across, and this is the way I want it. And she's done it for her that way, and it works out perfect. I suppose you must get asked as well, do you? Can you project it this way or that way?
Oh, absolutely. And I prefer it, actually, because being a fan of literature myself, it's it. And having written some, I wouldn't say I've written a lot, but having written some, the author has a vision in their mind of what they're trying to say. And you get some audiobook narrators that are simply reading the words on the page.
Yeah, you can tell, can't you?
Yeah, you can tell very much so. And I don't think it does a service to the author and what they're trying to move people with their words, So it's important that collaboration's got to be just, in my opinion, very thorough, because you want to reflect that author's wish,
Mention that it's 3 months work on that project. I've read somewhere that it takes maybe 10 hours of studio work to get 1 hour of finished audio. Is that about right, or?
It depends on how prolific you are with the editing and able to work the digital audio workstation. It's but definitely more along the lines of, for me, probably 4 hours,
Yeah.
because generally you'll have a reading of the work, then you'll begin the editing for timing and spaces and take care of that, and then there'll be the final mastering of the audio to make sure it's quality controlled per se, so those definitely take a lot of time, and then all your mistakes, because
I suppose there's going to be people are going to come back to you and say, didn't like the way you did that, or you've made a mistake there, so you have to go back in the studio and re-record it, and that's extra time again, isn't it?
Definitely, most definitely. And I think that's where the per finished hour came in. It's like you need to be good at it, or you're gonna kill yourself.
Absolutely. So the people, have someone come to you with another project now, or have you got something that you want to do particularly, narration wide or wise?
Actually, I'm currently working on The Sun Also Rises by Hemingway. One of Michelle's, if you talk to Michelle's favorite person in the world, she'll laugh, because we had a little aside conversation about Hemingway on Twitter a few days ago. But I'm actually working on that. There's a few audiobooks out there. They're horrible. And and I think it's really about getting into the reason I picked that project that I wanted to do for myself. It's obviously public domain now, I think the disillusionment and angst of the lost generation he was talking about then is pretty applicable now, given everything that's going on in the world. I mean, our young people today they get barraged nonstop with the world is ending. So it's a very interesting work, and he's just a fascinating guy. His life anyway, so.
Well, best of luck with that. That could get you massive sales, that I can imagine, in a work by Hemingway.
I guess it depends. Like I said, I don't think I'm really doing that project per se for revenue, because it is, it's a public domain work, and they have other copies of it, but I'd really just like to see it done kind of what I envision Hemingway was thinking of. He was a gruff guy, and the works I've heard of it are just, they're bland, to say the least.
Okay.
I suppose being a Hemingway book, though, it would get you more well known, should we say, than at least I would guess. You're doing the narration for a Hemingway novel.
I would assume it might perk some eyebrows and get a little more attention than just an unknown author, obviously. But and I'm hoping to find a psychological thriller. I'd love to latch my hands onto if I could find an author, because I'm just intrigued by the whole character development thing, and what makes it tick,
Who are your favorite authors then, George? I don't know why, but Thomas Harris came to mind then when you said a psychological thriller. I'm thinking, The Silence of the Lambs,
The Red Dragon.
I've always been intrigued by that psychological edge to characters, and so Capote's always piqued my interest, and obviously Hemingway for me does a wonderful job in his writing, because it's so succinct, and he's a wordsmith, and his economy of words to tell a story just have always thrilled me. So I'd probably rank those two up in what interests me,
Changing the subject, you've written your own books. Tell us about the two shorts, The Pages Make the Book.
My two short stories that I have up on Barnes and Nobles. Those are actually, if I ever get my act together, they're meant to be in a collection. They're meant to be in a collection of, again, that psychological development of a character. And it's just some funny stories, some sad stories, but those two particular that I've published, they're they're short stories of experiences that the character had, and obviously they're based on myself. And and
Yeah.
and I actually, funny story about those two. I met with two master's degree psychology students because they were helping me.
Yeah.
You know, they were like, I made them read the stories, you know, tell me what that means, how messed up I am. You know, and one of them's a story that has some joy and sorrow in it, and the other's purely funny, obviously, about parental divorce, which isn't really humorous all the time, but
Yeah.
if you knew my family, the story's pretty humorous. So.
Okay.
So you've written some screenplays as well. We've heard a lot of writers telling us COVID had a massive impact
Yeah.
on projects they were doing. A lot of people went to writing screenplays after that, and well, all sorts. So tell us a bit about your screenplays, what you've done, and when you did them.
Right. Well, actually, my time law enforcement partner, we were together for 20 years. He's since retired, but we wrote a script together. Obviously prior to COVID, and you're right, with the writers are, you know, it's slowed things down dramatically for everything, not just the industry, that industry. But we were new to it, and actually we had a wonderful contact in London, who's a pretty successful commercial advertisement filmmaker, and he had a lot of contacts, and he actually began shopping it around the European market, and got a lot of good reviews with it. And just then COVID hit, so obviously things are slowed down. But we had a great time writing that screenplay too. It was because we're both in law enforcement, and me with my military background. There's a huge debate in America about the Second Amendment of the Constitution and gun control and things of that nature. And so the screenplay is a pretty quirky character that kind of demonstrates the lack of common sense sometimes that goes into that issue here in America. And obviously, as military person and a law enforcement officer, I'm very pro Second Amendment, but like I said, the lack of common sense is kind of silly, you know. And there's a certain amount of tribalism that's going on in every issue nowadays politically, so it's brutal.
George, tell us about your working routine. Do you have set hours for the audio work, or do you put a set aside time for your own writing?
I do. Usually I've always been a night person.
Yeah.
And so I tends to be more quiet, you know, late at night, those kind of things for narration. And because obviously background noise becomes an issue or things of that nature. And as for my own writing, I need to be more diligent. I'll be honest for your audience. I definitely need to be more diligent. But when I do write, it's on my sailboat and taking advantage of those times out there where it's quiet and, you know, you get in a certain mood. I need to work on needing to be in a mood less to do right.
Yeah, that's very common.
Yeah, I think, I was just thinking the same. I think a lot of people feel like that, don't they? They write better depending on how, you know, what sort of day you're having.
Sure. And I find my character work changes you know, away from what I was trying to accomplish, depending on how that mood goes, you know. So
yeah, your characters go off on all sorts of tangents and become something you didn't really want them to, I suppose.
Exactly.
So what sort of films and fiction do you enjoy yourself then? I know we touched on your reading before, but what's your favorites, fiction and film wise?
I think my favorites really are they tend to be a little more dark, but just because somehow those characters seem to be more interesting a lot of the times. But really I like to be moved, you know, emotionally by something, by any kind of work, and whether it's humor of a serious nature, you know, or a dark nature. It's something that things that make you think. I guess if I had to boil it down to, you know, is just things that make you reflect on some kind of deep philosophical issue, maybe. That, and I'm a hopeless romantic. Dr. Zhivago, Omar Sharif,
Oh, yeah.
hands down, favorite movie.
Excellent. Yeah. David Lean film, brilliant. Yeah. What would be your main ambition? Would it be a blockbuster hit with an audiobook, or maybe a green light on one of the screenplays, or maybe both?
I think if my main goal, if I had to list a main goal,
Yeah.
that's a tough one. But I think it would be creating a work that can move somebody,
Yeah,
in a way that's memorable. I guess, you know, monetary motivations have never really been my thing. But yeah, I think it all boils down to wanting to create something that is worth a flip, you know.
Oh, yes, I know exactly what you mean. Well, like you said, Dr. Zhivago, that's your favorite film. That's got a high impact emotionally, that film. Just the musical score, the background, that has an effect on people emotionally.
Oh, absolutely. I'm still looking for my Laura. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. So finally, what advice would you give to a new or would-be writer who comes and says, I've got this idea in my head. What shall I do, George?
Yeah, I tell you, it may sound simplistic, but I think the answer to that question is probably best served by just saying, right.
Yeah.
That's my advice, right? Because you know, there's a lot of people out there that have things to say,
Yeah.
and never spit them on the paper, whether they're good, bad, or ugly. That's what edit. Because trust me, even the most talented writer gets an ogre for an editor that is going to tear you up. So don't worry about it. Say what you need to say and just write. And it seems simplistic, but a lot of people don't continue that effort to put their thoughts out there, you know, and it's important.
So, George, it's been an absolute pleasure spending time with you. Really appreciate your time.
I tell you guys, I really am thankful for y'all having me. Your wonderful show. I think it's fascinating.
Thanks.
Fantastic that your audience gets a chance to get to know creators versus just a name on a page or a screen. You know, and it is because, sort of like I said about the writing, you get to know the author and where they're at. So.
Yeah, you see that other side, definitely. Thanks. Let's keep in touch as we have been doing. And best wishes with the next project and with the current project.
I certainly appreciate it. And Terry, Stephen, please say hi to Michelle for me. I was hoping she could join us, but she's probably knee deep in that 27 hours of audiobook. So, but please do give my best wishes to her as well.
Certainly will. Certainly will do. Yeah, brilliant. But for now, George, cheers. You have a great rest of the weekend.
You too, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Cheers, George.
Bye.